Some call me Steve, Dad, husband, or friend. Others might call me boss, coach, or mentor. Today you can call me the Leadership Hacker. Thanks for listening in, I really appreciate it. My job as the Leadership Hacker is to hack into the minds, experiences, habits and learning of great leaders, C-suite executives, authors and development experts so that I can assist you developing your understanding and awareness of leadership. I'm Steve Rush and I'm your host today. I'm the author of Leadership Cake, I'm a transformation consultant and leadership coach and can't wait to start sharing all things leadership with you. Matt Schlegel is joining me on the show today. He's an author, consultant, speaker and founder of Schlegel Consulting. But before we get a chance to speak with Matt, it's a Leadership Hacking News. We've all heard of the Great Resignation, right? However, employees say unsustainable workloads and expectations are the things that are driving them to quit. In a recent article by Emmy Lucas of Forbes, she describes that not only unsustainable workloads are one of the top factors contributing to the Great Resignation, others such as uncaring managers, inadequate compensation, and lack of career development are all contributory factors. However, a survey completed by McKinsey recently, which queried nearly 600 employees, looked at those who'd left without another job lined up and those who returned to work. Much of the analysis of how to solve the Great Resignation is really focused on giving workers higher pay, better career opportunities or nicer perks and days off and mental therapy and help and better family leave. But there's been less attention paid to the actual workloads employees have and how employees plan to address that issue. 35% of respondents said unsustainable work performance expectations were the reason that they left their job without another in hand, and the same percentage said that they would leave uncaring leaders or a lack of career development. Following these reasons were a lack of meaningful work, a dearth of support for employee health and well-being, and inadequate compensation. But ironically, compensation ranked 6th as a reason for leaving, suggesting that evidence that pay isn't everything. It means something, of course. The report showed that those who work in an environment they like also find purpose in their work and have better relationships and therefore probably stick around. When it comes to returning to work, 47% of the 600 respondents polled, and about a quarter of those returned to non-traditional work, whilst 3/4 went back to traditional employment. And of that 600 respondents who left without another job lined up, 44% of them said that they'd have little or no interest returning to the same job, doing the same work in the next 6 months. The highest ranking reason for why people did return to work in the work they were doing previously was having a strong identity and policy that addresses workplace flexibility. So post-pandemic workplace flexibility includes not just hours, but flexible places, space, time, empathy, understanding, commitments to the work that they're undertaking. So organisations and employers really need to take a hard look at whether they're ready and can actually deliver on making the right structural changes to actually deal with things like work overload. As we move into the next phase of change, we're already in the future of work. So it's really important that the work itself is prioritised. We tend to want to make those quick and easy solutions, but it will take us all effort and time to readjust in the hybrid world or whatever label we choose to give it. So my leadership hack here is, often when people leave an organisation we conduct exit interviews. I wonder if it is time for us to have stay interviews to really get to the heart of understanding what's really driving the needs and desires of people who want to stay here. And if we listen, adapt and create the right environments for our teams, our co-workers and our organisation, we're all going to be the beneficiaries of that. That's been the Leadership Hacking News. Really love for you to share any stories, insights on either our social media or through our website. Let's get into the show. Our special guest on today's show is Matt Schlegel. He's the principal of Schlegel Consulting and Evolutionary teams. He's an entrepreneur, an ex-tech executive, and now the author of Teamwork 9.0. Matt, welcome to the Leadership Hacker podcast.
It is a delight to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
It's our delight too. And we always like to kick off our shows to dive in to find out a little bit about the man behind the magic. So tell us a little bit about how you, Matt, ended up doing what you're doing now and moved away from the tech business to help lead evolutionary teams.
Oh yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, so like you said, I started out with a tech background, studied engineering, electrical engineering, and as I proceeded through my career, my boss came to me one day and said, "Hey Matt, we want you to manage a team." I'm like, "Why do you want me to manage a team? I know nothing about leading people. I only know about leading electrons." And he's like, "Don't worry, you'll be fine." Well, I'm not the type to be not worried. And so I was worried. And when I get that way, what I do is I go and study and get my hands on everything, information I could find and learn about, what it is that I'm embarking on as, a leader of people. So along that journey, I encountered a system called the Enneagram. And the Enneagram is, commonly understood as a personality system. It has 9 types that are in the system. And by the time I had encountered the Enneagram, I had already been exposed to other, personality systems in the workplace, like Myers-Briggs and DISC and Strength Finders. There's a bunch of them. And so I kind of put it into that category, and but I want to use it, and I tried it, and I used it for myself and my family, just to kind of test it out, and I found that it was so powerful and fascinating, and helped me understand myself in a way that I'd never understood before, and understand my relationships both professionally and personally, as my type interacted with the other types. And so yeah, so that fascination just led me on this journey of exploring it more and more. I started to use it in the workplace and had incredible results, and that's why I went on to build a consulting practice around that, and eventually wrote my book Teamwork 9.0 to share some of the learnings that I had along the way.
And was there a pivotal moment for you? Because, let's be quite frank about it. You're quite modest. You had some big roles in some big organizations. You were part of the Palm Pilot evolution, back in the day. There must have been, you were riding the crest of a corporate career at one stage. And there must have been a pivotal moment you thought, you know what, I can take what I'm learning and I can share it with others. What actually happened there?
Yeah, so it was, so my career, it started out in tech. It started in San Diego. I was raised in the Bay Area, and so when we had children, we wanted to move closer back, to where our families are to raise the kids, and so I started on the, just that journey of startups, and it was just exhilarating to be in that environment, and developing new products, cutting edge all the way. And so being in that for 15 years or so, just very intensely, I got to the point, and I guess it was around 2007. It was during the downturn, and I just had this idea of, one day I wanted to go into consulting and have my own practice. And at that point in my career, I said, well, if that's kind of what my long-term path is, why not test it out? Why not see if I can start a consulting business and run a consulting business now? And, if it works, great, because then I'm, in my dream role, earlier than anticipated. If it doesn't work out, then my plan B, just, go back into tech. Well, fortunately and gratefully, it did work out really well. And so I was able to just go down that path and build my consulting practice. And I've been doing it now for 15 years this year.
Yeah, excellent story. So when you talk about the Enneagram, it's revolved around 9 numbers, which I guess is what's driven the whole teamwork 9.0.
Right.
What is it about the numbers then that is so different with what you do versus then some of the others which are letter driven, like DISC and Myers-Briggs and the like?
Right. As an engineer, one of the things that I found really satisfying about the Enneagram as opposed to some of the other systems is that it really speaks to our evolving over time, how our behaviors change over time. And those behaviors will change depending on our stress level. Are we feeling secure or insecure? And our level of maturity. Are we younger? Are we older? And so this is one of the fascinating things. And if you look at the Enneagram diagram, you'll see these lines within the circle. And that's what those lines are talking about, is how it moves. Well, so that was one aspect. But then I did ask that question, why are they numbers rather than letters? And it turns out there's a reason why they're numbers. And it's because it speaks to motion around the outer circle. So if you look at the Enneagram, you just look at the circle and numbers, it looks like a clock, right? And just like the hands of a clock go, clockwise around the circle, the Enneagram is also describing a dynamic of clockwise motion around the circle. And when I thought about it more, I realized, this is describing a process. And these are the steps, the order in that process, 1 through 9. And it describes the way humans solve problems. It's a problem-solving process.
Right.
Once I had that epiphany, I'm like, now I have a problem-solving process I can work with my teams on, and it maps, there is a personality type that's perfectly tuned for each step in problem solving. And once you have that, model, then you can have, great success with teams, understanding how to work teams around problem solving to get results.
So it's almost kind of decoding the problem inside out, isn't it?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it lets you understand, where your teams are going to be really good at problem solving. It's going to tell you where they might struggle, or where, steps they might skip altogether, just because there's no dynamic represented by the team at that point in problem solving.
And from the top to the bottom of those 9 steps, there's a neurological and chronological order in the which way we do this, right?
This is another thing that before I really dove into the Enneagram, I wanted to make sure that there was some neurological underpinning to the system. And it's still very early, and we don't have, really a good understanding yet. But I found a fellow who described a model of how you could get those 9 distinct types out of 2 parts of the brain, which is the amygdala and the prefrontal cortex. Each one of those parts, since we have a bicameral brain, you're going to have right dominance, left dominance, and then a middle, ambi, or ambiguated. And it's the 3 states of the amygdala times the 3 states of the prefrontal cortex gives you the 9 types. So that's a model that I came across, and it seems to match well. The behaviors described by those states of the amygdala and the prefrontal cortex match well to the behaviors described by the Enneagram. So it kind of gave me, this, at least 2 ways to look at the way people are behaving that were consistent with one another.
When we first met, Matt, I had this kind of little bit of an aha moment around the fact that this is where it can really start to engineer great teamwork and thinking, because if we're thoughtful of what triggers a reaction or a threat response in our amygdala, which is that part of the brain that regulates the emotion,
right,
we can maybe think about tactically how we can avoid them, and then how we can practically spend more time in our executive thinking, which is that prefrontal cortex. And it was that aha moment for me around, that's why there's 9. And that's how they kind of fit together.
Yes, exactly. And you bring up such a good point. And this, speaks to one of the ways that an individual can use the Enneagram is once you understand, that amygdala trigger in yourself and what that feels like and what that's going to cause you to do. Once you have an understanding of that at an intellectual level, then when you do go into that state, you can know it better and manage it better, and then bring yourself through it and back out to a more secure and healthy state without inadvertently just letting yourself be taken over by that emotional state.
Right. Yeah. So let's dive into the 9 themes. That could be really helpful just to get a sense of what are they and how they work and how they all are related.
Right. Yeah. So, I'll go around in order and also describe how each one of the types helps in problem solving. So, what's the first step in problem solving? It's, hey, there's a problem. It shouldn't be like that.
Yeah.
It should be like this. Well, that's the dynamic of type 1, often called the perfectionist. And the perfectionist is the one who's going to identify, hey, things shouldn't be like that. They should be like this. So that's the dynamic of 1. And then the dynamic of 2 speaks to, who cares, right? And that's the next step in problem solving is if there's a problem, then you need people to care enough about the problem to actually want to do something to solve the problem. And type 2 is called the helper. And so they're the ones who identify, there's something that needs to be done, and I'm going to help get that done. So that's step 2, and that's the dynamic. Then, step 3 in problem solving is just coming up with ideas for how to successfully solve the problem. And the dynamic of 3 is they're often called the achiever, and they're the ones who want to succeed, and they're always scanning for what ideas can I work with and execute for an ultimate success. And they also have this wonderful ability to suppress their emotion, because every time somebody throws out an idea, most of us are going to go, oh, that's a great idea, or ooh, that's a terrible idea. Well, the 3 doesn't have that filter. And so when they start throwing out ideas, they can generate lots of ideas kind of unfiltered. It's like throwing spaghetti against the wall.
Right.
Right. So then you get to step 4, because step 4 is to see what sticks, right? It's that, oh, that's a great idea. It's that emotional reaction to any idea. And type 4, they're often called the romantic, but what it's saying is that they are the most emotionally tuned in to, the emotional content in their environment. But it also, in problem solving, gives you kind of this emotional filter to pass ideas through so that you outcome, the most positive ideas, the ideas that the team wants to pursue and has the emotional energy to pursue, because, hey, we still have a long way to get the problem solved, right?
Right.
So
yeah.
Now we move over into what's called the head group. The head group is the 5, the 6, and the 7. So after you have your positive idea, then what you want to do is validate that idea. You need to test it. You need to analyze it. You need to, so you do your pro-con analysis, your cost-benefit analysis, and maybe some prototyping to make sure that the idea is going to work. Once you have validated your idea, then you need to build and by the way, type 5 is called the analyst or the observer. They're the ones who dig in and go very, very deep and explore ideas and collect lots of information. So then you go to type 6. which is it's kind of like a planner. They're always thinking about the future, and they map whatever they're, wherever they are, connect the dots into the future to a successful completion of the goal. And so you have that idea. Now you map it into the future and you create your plan. Okay. Next step is you need to sell the plan to, the rest of the team or the broader collection of stakeholders and get buy-in. And that's step 7. That's often called the enthusiast. So you can imagine a cheerleader, saying, "Hey, we found a great idea. Let's go solve the problem."
Yeah.
And get everybody excited. Okay. Now, what have we done steps 1 through 7? Talk, talk, talk. Now we get to 8, time for action. And so the type 8 is one of the most action-oriented types, and they want to get stuff done. They want to just get to the point and just move forward. And so, and the type 8 dynamic is essentially wanting to secure control of the environment. So it's really a take charge, get stuff done type of dynamic. And then finally we get to 9. You think, oh, after the 8's done, okay, we solved the problem. And inevitably, whenever you have any kind of transformational change, some feathers are going to be ruffled and some toes are going to be stepped on. And so what you want to do is, have the conversations to smooth out and integrate the solution with the broader community. And that's the dynamic of 9, is listening, understanding other people's perspectives, and trying to reduce conflict and harmonize with everybody. And inevitably, in those conversations, people are going to identify new problems, which is why the Enneagram is a circle.
And it goes round again.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's, in a nutshell, that's the really dynamic.
Neat.
Yeah.
So if I completed an assessment on an Enneagram, would it give me a kind of a push and a pull kind of, so I might be strong in a 9 but less in a 1? How would it kind of play out as a result?
Right. And so that's a great question. And I advise people when they take an assessment to just use it as a process of elimination, because whenever most people take the assessment, they score highly on 2 or 3 types and low on other types. So you eliminate the low scoring types and you keep the higher scoring types. And,
right.
So the first time I took the assessment, I scored highest on type 8. And but I'm not a type 8. It turns out I was a type 6, and that was my second highest scoring. But I was in an environment where I had to behave like an 8, and the environment encouraged me to be like an 8. And so when I'm taking the assessment, it's like, yep, I do that. Yep, I do that. Yep, I do that. But it wasn't really speaking to, the way I would like innately, respond. Is just my environment was encouraging me to respond in that way. So, that's pretty common. And so when you have, high scoring on several types, then you have to kind of go to that next level of understanding those types, understanding the underlying motivators of each types, and then identifying which of those motivations best match with your internal innate motivation.
Got it. So is there a naturally occurring opportunity, or is there a natural occurring time when it's best to do this?
Oh, yeah. I think that it's probably okay to do it anytime if you are interested in knowing more about yourself, knowing what makes you tick, and knowing that having that knowledge will make you a better leader, a better entrepreneur. It just can improve your all of the relationships that you have in your life, both personally and professionally. So when you're ready for that, then that's the best time to take the test, and then start to ask those questions about yourself. What is making me tick? Where is it that I I excel? Where is it that I'm not as interested, and I want to put people around me that can, complement my skill set so that we can be an ever stronger and more effective team.
And I love the whole idea as well that, when you first did it, you came out as an 8, but actually you recognize you're more of a 6. And it's important that we don't just do this once in isolation, that we maybe revisit it from time to time to ensure that we fully understand that how the environment's impacting on our behaviors as well, right?
Exactly. And the once you do understand your dominant type, and I kind of look at it this way. It's like handedness. Our brain has dominances that drive our handedness, and it will, people will say they're right-handed or left-handed, or maybe they're ambidextrous. Well, the same way with your prefrontal cortex, and the same way with your amygdala. And so one of these Enneagram types tends to be more dominant than the others. And so that's, and that's kind of your starting point. And then you can, once you know that, then you can see yourself change over time based on that Enneagram model and those lines within the Enneagram.
So is there a perfect map for a team? So you've just studied this for years, and I'm just curious to find out whether or not you've noticed a pattern occur over that period of time that says, in order to have the perfect mix across a team, this is what it might look like.
Yeah. And so, I'll start off and say, it's highly unlikely that any team that you come across is going to be completely and well balanced. It's, just, for whatever reason, you're not going to have all 9 types represented on your team. And so,
right.
When you start to, work with a team to try to, solve a problem, if you have an initiative that you want to, bring your team together to tackle, then what I've found is you need to pull people in from whichever starting point they're at, pull them into the dynamic of that step in problem solving, right? So, step 1 is that, let's define the problem and take the time to get everybody to think through what is the problem from their perspective. And then also think, once the problem is solved, what will the world look like? So in that step, you're essentially getting your list of things that need to be solved, and then also creating a vision for the team of how the world would look like once the problem is solved. And, and even though you might not have any type 1s on your team, and type 1s would just naturally get this, but you can pull people into that if you you direct the team to actually focus on it and make sure that all the voices are heard. And so that's how I use it. I just pull people into the dynamic and then work through the various steps so that the team systematically hits each one of those energies.
Yeah. And I suspect also, if you're highly dominant in any one of these 9, then that also becomes then a development area, I suspect.
Right. And and this speaks to, how people want to play to their strengths, right? So they want to jump to that, point in problem solving where they're naturally gifted, right? So the 8s want to jump right into action, so they already have a sense, I know what needs to happen. Let's just go do it, and they want to jump straight to step 8 without having worked through, the other steps. And so you'll see this in teams, so if you go into a team that is dominated by a type 8 leader, you'll find that the team has kind of learned to just, do what the 8 says. And then the type 8 leader might confide in me and say, I really wish the team would take more initiative and come up with ideas and execute them themselves. Well, right. And I'll say, well, you would need to let them do that in their way, working through those steps, because the team might not have that same intuition about what to do that you do. So if you want to encourage them to, take initiative, you have to allow them to do it in their way, which won't be your way, and give them the space and the time to work through this process. And that's one of the ways I guide my clients who are type 8 leaders, is to let them work through the process and let them kind of build that problem solving muscle themselves, so they're not always relying on the type 8 leader for direction.
Right. And I also wonder if a type 8 leader might make assumptions by jumping straight in at 8 that could have been identified by going through the steps preceding that.
Yeah, well, of course, there are, when you jump straight to action, you are having assumptions and you're making assumptions. And, the interesting thing about the type 8, they're in the intuitive group, which is the 8, 9, and 1. So they already have intuition about what it is that they want to do. The other interesting thing about 8s is that they're really, they don't really dwell on, failure. They're happy to just jump in, try something. Hey, it doesn't work. Okay, let's adjust and do a course correction and start going in this direction, right? So they will, just by always acting, iterate towards the solution without necessarily stepping back and taking time to think things through. This works great for type 8s, but for those of us who aren't type 8s, it can be a little uncomfortable, because for like type 6s, right, we're trying to map the dots into the future, right, and we're thinking, but if we do this, then this could happen or that could happen, and then our brains start racing on all of the problems, and that we want to try to mitigate, but rather than crashing into the wall and then changing direction. So and that's where a dynamic, that's just like a 6-8 dynamic that happens on teams.
Yeah. So you wrote the book Teamwork 9.0.
Yes.
How does that differentiate from the traditional Enneagram? What would be the kind of the extra layer of context they get from that?
Right. So the thing that I really wanted to focus on in my book was that dimension of problem solving. And there are many books about the Enneagram as a personality system. So I didn't want to write another book just about the personality side of the Enneagram. What I wanted was to take that and then build onto it that dimension of working through that outer circle of the Enneagram in the order of those steps with teams, to show that the Enneagram has this other dimension to it of a problem solving process. And so that's where I talk about the problem solving process. I give some case studies and anecdotes. I talk about, as a leader, how do you respond when your team doesn't have a specific strength in problem solving, and how to overcome that, how to get each of the team members to step up. I call it shared leadership, because if you have somebody who's really strong at a certain point, well, then encourage them to take the lead at that step in problem solving. I talk about the creativity. Each type brings a distinct creativity to problem solving. So there's a number of aspects that you can apply the Enneagram to when it's in the context of team problem solving.
Love it. And we'll have an opportunity to share with our listeners at the end of the show how they can get hold of some of that information too.
Well,
before we get there, I want to dive into and hack into your leadership brain now, having led and worked with numbers of teams all over the world, to distill all of that great knowledge and learning that you've had on your career, Matt, and hack into those top 3 leadership hacks. What would they be?
Right. So, the first thing that, I mentioned at that opening story, is, I realize that, as a type 6, that worrying is a part of my dynamic. And that is caused by anxiety. So, the 5, 6, and 7 are in the thinking group or head group, but the underlying issue for us is anxiety. And I, I have this like feeling in my gut that's kind of a constant friend I have, and I could feel it kind of go up or down like a thermometer. And the Enneagram gave me a word for that. It's like, oh, that's anxiety. That's what's causing that.
Yeah.
But it's also, it's like a nuclear furnace for me. It gives me tremendous energy. And now that I know what's going on, I can use that and say, okay, well, where am I right now? Am I feeling comfortable? Are we headed in a good direction? Or are my spidey senses telling me, oh, something's amiss and we need to kind of reflect and look back. So, so that's one way that I've, as a leader, learned to just be more conscientious of my internal state, both to, understand myself, but also to make sure that, whatever is causing my anxiety doesn't spill out over into my relationships with my team that, might adversely affect our forward progress. Right. So that's, I think just that self-awareness is super important. And then, the other aspect is, once you understand yourself, you can really start to understand the dynamics of the other folks on your team. And they really appreciate this because you are understanding them in a way that helps you better communicate with them, helps them better motivate themselves, and you can put them in roles where they can really thrive and show off their natural gifts, and allows you to have deeper, more meaningful conversations with your team so that you can better build rapport and trust with them, which is another key to leadership.
And your third?
And the third, I would say, is, when you, once you have that, then you can understand what your, the strengths and weaknesses of your team. And then what you want to do is like realize, okay, I have gaps in my team. I want to make sure that, we have a diversity of perspectives. And I caught, and so many people are talking about the need for diversity on teams, and there are many dimensions of diversity. But I would also say that, be aware of style diversity, because people tend, to like people like themselves. That's why we have the saying, birds of a feather flock together. And, if you're a hiring manager and then you're hiring people you like, what's going to happen is you're going to build a lopsided team. So just having the understanding of, the value of having a more diverse team in terms of styles, you're going to get, a better set of ideas to work with, and you're going to have, better overall outcomes because you have all of these different perspectives that are adding to the overall success.
I love that last one. Difference makes a difference. Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
So the next part of the show, we affectionately call it hack to attack.
Okay.
So in essence, this is where something is just screwed up. It hasn't worked out well. Maybe it's been catastrophic. But as a result of the experience, you've now taken that as a learning, and it's now a force of good in your life or work. What would be your hack to attack?
Yes. And, so one of the things that I've learned, is, as a person who is, somewhat based in anxiety, I tend to be on the cautious side. And so I might overcompensate on being too cautious. And so that's one of the things I have to, learn. I learned about myself, and then I learn, and this is where I can, value the perspectives of others who, aren't necessarily as prone to that perspective, and then, tap into that dynamic when I need to. And that's been a great learning for me, and it's allowed me to better appreciate the other perspectives and the other members of my team, so that I can, rely on them when my anxiety might start to, get too much. So that's, I would say, one of the, bigger learnings that I've had to, deal with personally and overcome personally.
All starts with self-awareness again, though, doesn't it?
It does.
Yeah.
It does. And I think, that was the starting point. That self-awareness was the starting point for some of, the best learning and experiences that I had in my career. And that's why I got so excited about this and wanted to pursue it and write the book.
Exactly. Last part of the show, we get a chance for you to do a bit of time travel, bump into Matt at 21 and give him some advice. And you have a chance to give him some words of wisdom. What would they be?
Yeah, that's a great question. And if you ask my kids, they'll tell you what it is, because they know. And that's, learn the Enneagram, learn that, what your style is, learn, how that's influencing your behaviors and your decision making, and learn that, your style isn't the only style. It's not the correct style. It's not the right style, and, once you understand that, there are these distinct styles, and that you can now put them into context of, there's completely, it's valid to just be, like the type 4, swimming in emotions. What does that bring to the party? How does that help the team move forward with that, connection to emotions? Or, where are the intuitive people, that sense of how is that informing the team? And so, those, just that appreciation of, where each type is coming from is hugely important. And I think as a young person, to be able to appreciate that and understand the value in it, just makes you have a better appreciation for all of all the people in your life.
Great advice. As you're sharing that, I'm thinking I need to get my my young teenagers and my kids in their early 20s into this, because actually the more dynamically they're aware of things, the more it can help them. And also, I wonder if this works across the family as well, right?
Absolutely. It's, and this is really, how it's commonly used to help people, understand, the dynamics with, in your personal relationships. It's, very valuable for that, because then, you can end up, avoiding, conflicts, and understanding, if you do go down the path of conflict, why that's happening, and then how to get back out. And a great tool for that. And then young people, they're, experimenting with different relationships in their life, and then, having a framework for, okay, well, I'm a type 8, and I was, I had a relationship with a type 9, and what did that feel like? How did that work? Does that feel right for you? And you can, at least understand and navigate those relationships a little bit better when you have that framework to work with.
Awesome stuff. So as folk have been listening to this, Matt, I'm pretty certain they're thinking, I need to get a copy of Teamwork 9.0. I need to find out a little bit more about the Enneagram. And of course, you've got a bunch of resources that can help them. Where's the best place that we can send them so they can connect with your work?
Oh, yeah. Thank you so much. So my website is evolutionaryteams.com. evolutionaryteams.com. So that's all one word, Evolutionary Teams. And there you'll find, some resources about it. There's a complimentary assessment, Enneagram assessment, that you're welcome to take there. And also, you can find out information about Teamwork 9.0. And then I blog and share, different topics on leadership and decision making and teamwork. And I'm doing a series of interviews with leaders who are using their essentially self-awareness about their emotional state in their leadership practice, and how that motivates, inspires, and drives their leadership behaviors. So it's really fascinating stuff.
Great. We'll put those links and the links to your social media connections as well in our show notes, so folk can connect with you as soon as they finish listening to this.
Well, thank you so much, Steve. I really appreciate it.
Matt, it's been fascinating talking. I am incredibly excited about the different dynamics that Teamwork 9.0 brings about, and actually how that can help other teams become more effective in their work that they do. And thank you for coming and sharing your stories and being part of our community on the Leadership Hacker podcast.
Well, thank you so much, Steve. I really enjoyed the conversation.
Me too. Thanks, Matt. I want to sign off by saying a thank you to you for joining us on the show too. We recognise without you there is no show, so please continue to share, subscribe and like, and continue to get in touch with us with the great news stories that we share every week. And so that we can continue to bring you great stories, please make sure you give us a 5-star review where you can, and share this podcast with your friends, your teams and your communities. If you want to find us on social media, you can find us on Facebook and Twitter at Leadership Hacker, Leadership Hacker on YouTube, and on Instagram, _leadership_hacker. And if that wasn't enough, you can also find us on our website, leadership-hacker.com. Tune in to next episode to find out what great hacks and stories are coming your way. That's me signing off. I'm Steve Rush, and I've been your Leadership Hacker.